Hey everyone, can everybody hear me? It is. I'm sharing my screen right now so we can get going. Everybody can hear me. All right, let me know if you can hear me. I'm gonna go to the chat room here. All right, so we're gonna get going. You should be able to see my screen. Let's see. All right, so today what we're going to be talking about is going to be basically off-season training and kind of defining your KPIs. So obviously we want to talk about what all of those are. Basically the big goal today, with it kind of being coming up on off-season, I just want you guys to understand kind of what proper off-season program should look like, as well as how to determine what the KPIs are. So we'll talk about what those are, your key performance indicators, both in the gym and on the golf course, because obviously those are going to dictate how what you work on and how you work on different things. So that kind of leads into understanding how to practice off of those, and then we'll talk about periodizing that. So what types of things should you focus on when, and that sort of a thing. So we'll kind of cover all of those as well. Then we'll go through. We'll have some videos of different examples of different types of kind of the strength, the power, and kind of where those should fit in. So, so basically, as all of you here who work with, because you all work with us, every one of you started with an initial evaluation and a screen. So that would basically be, if you're in-house and we put the 3D K-vest on you, we have you, swing, we have you do the shot put where you throw the ball, the chest pass. We do all your mobility testing, so seeing your shoulders, your trunk rotation, all of that, all kind of the mobility, the power, the strength, depending on where you're at in terms of the level with strength training. We just had test week here, so we'll look at how strong you are with squatting and hinging, deadlifting, pressing with bench press, rowing with bent over rows. So we'll kind of get a real idea of where that all is. And then obviously all of you have experience from there. We'll pick up kind of what your big limitations are. And from there, we'll talk about, any specific things that we need to look at correctively. Think of just generally everybody needs to kind of squat, hinge, push, pull, but some of you may need more work on your thoracic rotation. Others maybe more on your shoulder rotation. For some of you, maybe your mobility is great. It's more specifically strengthening the posterior chain, the glutes and the hamstrings. So there's lots of different nuances where we can kind of nuance your program to make it more specific. So you definitely want that in your off-season program as well. And then, as we'll talk about, like I've said kind of already, is mobility, strength, power, stability. All of that should be incorporated into one program, which is your off-season plan. And there's different elements of that. I have on the slide speed power and strength power. There's kind of think of a continuum. There's strength speed and speed strength. We think of like a medicine ball. We'll talk about this more a little bit later with actual video examples, but think of like a medicine ball throw as a very low load, but you're going to be moving that fast. So that's more on the speed strength side of the spectrum versus a strength speed, maybe something like a heavier lift, like a squat or a press, where you're not moving it as fast because it's requiring more strength, but you're still trying to move it as fast as you can. It's just obviously not going to move nearly as fast as as the medicine ball when you're throwing that. So, and then obviously you want to always reassess and then just repeat. And that's kind of your off-season program. These elements are going to be exactly the same in your in-season, your preseason, your postseason. We'll talk a couple slides that talk about kind of how you identify which of these areas we want to be more focused on at different times and less focused on at others. So KPIs, key performance indicators. So we're going to start with those because those ultimately drive your training program in the gym and what you should be doing, for your on-course work, whether it's getting fit from an equipment standpoint, maybe it's technically trying to make some changes. in regards to those two elements, the only reason you would ever want to do those is if you know it's going to directly impact your performance. I can't tell you how many people this time of year come up to me and say, oh, I'm going to make a swing change, or I'm going to get new clubs. And when I ask them, well, why? And they say, well, because I have to. And it's very difficult, very rare that I'll have somebody say, well, because if I change X, this will improve my proximity to hole from 120 to 140 yards, which is where I'm losing most of my shots. And if I can improve that to go from being on average 15 feet away to 8 feet away, my 8-foot make percentage is 60%, and my 15-foot make percentage is 2%. So I'll increase my birdie putts or putts made. Excuse me. So that's the level of detail that you want to think about is, what are the key performance metrics in your golf game that actually drive down your score. There'll be a point where you swing the club fast enough, being on average 150 yards from the hole to 146 yards from the hole may not be that big of a deal. If you're swinging on a very low percentile and you bring that up, that may be a huge deal for you. Other people, it may be putt percentages from specific distances, proximity to holes, those sorts of things. So those are on the course metrics. Those are very poorly defined in any research that you kind of have to do a lot of your own research. We're working on helping you along with that, though. Just a little, I guess, sneak peek there. But the next part is going to be in the gym. So these are very well defined. We've done a lot of work to get this pretty defined for you. So we'll talk about those as well. So just like I was talking about with the on-course KPIs, some simple examples: how many greens in regulation, driving distance, proximity to hole, distance of the first putt, your make percentage from specific distances. So I think it's important to track your stats, because then you can make objective decisions based on where you're losing strokes and where you're not losing strokes. I think way too many golfers start making all these swing changes because it doesn't look good, or because they think their miss is left or right. But then we don't ever close the loop on that, which is what I talked about in the beginning. You assess, see where you're at, implement the plan, and then you need to go back and reassess and see, did you make a change? Was spending all that money on lessons and all the hours and hours and hitting hundreds and thousands of balls, did that actually make a true difference in your score? Or are you still a 5 handicap just like you were a 5 handicap before? Or did you move from a 15 handicap to a 5 handicap because of the changes you made? So I think I can't stress enough, this is kind of some of the next area where we're looking at is partnering with a lot of golf professionals who believe in the data and have data, and can we collect it in the same way that we figured out the correlations between physical performance and speed performance, and injury risk and those sorts of things. Can we look at data and what are the key metrics based on where you are skill wise? Because that's going to, that impact your score. So for example, for young kids, or basically for people just starting out, if you can chip and putt, you're going to be a very good player around the green. But as you get older, so for like junior golfers, like basically think 8 to 12, if you can chip and putt, you're going to win a lot of events. You're going to score low relative to your competitors. But as they get older, now distance actually is going to come into play as meaning more. So what matters more at different ages and places in development changes. Just like in the gym, vertical leap has a terrible relationship to club head speed for younger kids, but as we get older, it has a very, very positive correlation. Or weight, the weight of a junior correlates extremely highly to club head speed. The heavier you are once you're over 50, that actually has a negative relationship to how fast you're going to swing. So things change with age, and I think that's what kind of our next frontier that we're looking for is we're continuing to push on the physical side is how do we tie this into the golf side. So I think this off season, if you haven't been taking your stats, start tracking at the very least greens, fairways, putts, maybe proximity to hole, length of your first putt, those sorts of things, and then start to get 5 rounds in and start to draw some conclusions of what changed on the rounds that you did better versus the rounds you did worse. All right. So in the gym, so these you guys should all be pretty familiar with working with us. We test this with all of you at least twice a year. We hopefully most of you 3 times to 4 times. But swing speed, that's the sport-specific metric we look at. But then also shot put, chest pass, vertical. Those are your three power elements that are really extremely highly correlated to club head speed. Vertical and then relative strength. So this is the next area where you'll be seeing a lot more of us releasing information on this in terms of how strong is strong enough. So can you squat, 100%, like basically 1-to-1 of your body weight. If you weigh 200 pounds, can you squat 200 pounds? If you weigh 100 pounds and you squat 200 pounds, then you're squatting 1.5 times your body weight, or sorry, 2 times your body weight. If you're 100 pounds and you squat 150, you're squatting 1.5 times body weight. So there's a point where we're finding where you're strong enough, and then at that point, then it's a matter of moving to more velocity kind of training, focused training. So I think relative strength is a huge KPI to be tracking and looking at. And then the other is going to be rotary mobility. That's the big one, along with the power metrics that you guys are very familiar with. Your neck, your shoulders, your thoracic spine, and your hips. Do you rotate well through those four? So those are the kind of the basic KPIs that you're looking at when you're in the gym or physically. How are you going to build your program around those? And then I think the key is after we get into, we're in North Carolina here, so we have some members in, say, South Africa or Australia. Seasons are kind of flipped, but basically when you get to the end of your winter season or your off season, when you're not playing as much, I think the key is once you're playing to continue with a program. Basically what we see is if you continue about twice a week, you're going to probably, assuming you're playing a lot in season, you're probably going to lose 3 to 5% of your power output from the end of off season until the next beginning of off season. That's just normal from wear and tear on the nervous system, fatigue, those sorts of things. If you don't continue with that program, we actually see those drops become higher. So the reason why we're okay with the 3 to 5% gain is because then you usually see a bigger percentage gain through the next, to the next end of that 12-month period. So net in 12 months, you will have improved. But, it's not linear. There are kind of ups and downs. And that's a little bit of the kind of the low ebb and the ebb and flow of it during season. So it is important to continue working out and taking care of things in the off season, in season. And that's why those assessments are important. So that's why we do one the end of the off season. We do one middle of the season to catch those really, and if there's any big ebbs, and then we do it again, obviously, in the beginning of the next off season. So that's a pretty solid kind of plan from a reassessment standpoint. All right. And then, I apologize. It looks like the arrows got messed up. I swear this was pretty on my screen when I made it. So basically, if we look at this image, what it's supposed to be on the, here, I can draw on the screen here. Draw here so I can kind of hopefully help you guys out a little bit. All right. All right. So kind of this row, so kind of all the way down. Think of kind of through there. This is basically talking about what you should be looking at in relative to your golf. And then this row is looking at what you should be looking at in the gym. Okay. So basically, if you're looking on those left arrows in the winter or your off season, your golf volume is going to decrease. So this is looking at how much of the volume that you're doing. So your golf volume is going to decrease. You can see the big arrow drops. And then on the right arrow, that's what should be happening in the gym, is you're going to see your gym increase. Okay. So if you're thinking about it, basically we want to kind of keep a level amount of activity. So as in the wintertime, golf is not as much, so we can increase our fitness or our performance training so that we have kind of a net right where we were when we were playing a lot more. So that's kind of what you're looking for volume. You're going to spend more time, more reps in the gym. You're going to have less reps, less time playing golf, generally speaking. When you get into kind of just after off season, so in the North America here in the spring, you're going to probably see a little bit of an uptick in golf. So you want to start decreasing the amount of volume you're doing in the gym. That's usually where you'll see an increase in intensity in the loads. So we think of periodization right now in the beginning of the off season, you're going to be doing not as heavy, but you're probably doing sets of 8, maybe 10s. As we get into the spring, you start to see those reps come down to 5s, 4s, 3s, and basically the intensity's up. So the volume is decreased. That helps to keep you fresher, but the intensity stays high. That keeps your nervous system firing at high levels. That allows you to swing faster. So you're not as tired, but your nervous system's used to moving at a high rate, which ultimately then translates into golf. You're swinging faster. So as golf kind of has a little bit of an uptick in the early season, the gym's going to have a downtick. When you get to summer, if we consider that kind of heavy golf season, you see a huge uptick in golf, particularly for our junior golfers. They travel as much, if not more, than our professionals. You're going to see a big drop in volume in the gym. That's where you're looking maybe 2 times a week in terms of lifting. Loads are going to be relative high, so we're not doing 60% of what your maxes are. You're going to probably be operating in the 80 to 90% in general speaking. Obviously, there's flows through there, but your reps are way down to keep you fresh because you're using so much energy in the heat and walking and playing that you don't have as much to give in the gym. So just like if this is where we want to be, golf was low, gym was high in the off season, that they flip once you get to the heavy in season. And then you can see once you get to fall, they kind of start to come back a little bit more to the middle. But golf will probably, as it starts to get cooler, days get shorter, golf will start to decrease some, and you start to increase your gym time. And that's kind of the flow that you take throughout the year in terms of your volume. So does that make sense that volume is the biggest predictor of fatigue or one of the biggest influences of fatigue? So if you want to be more fresh, don't do less weight with more reps, do more weight with less reps. That actually will make you more fresh, less sore, and from a golf perspective, perform at a higher level. So that's the volume side. When we start talking about where your focuses should be, these go in conjunction with that. So in the wintertime, as you're starting to play less golf, that's the time to take stock of your season. If you've hopefully taken stats, there's lots of free apps out there that you can track in terms of where your ball landed, how far you were, and depending how in depth you want to get with it. You could be super simple and just do how many greens, fairways, and putts that I have. You can get into where are your misses. You can get, our professionals know exactly what their average distance to the pin is from specific yardages. So I think this is the time to start to evaluate those KPIs and come up with an actual practice plan with your professional in terms of addressing the key performance indicators that actually influence your scoring. And if the technique changes, makes sense to improve that KPI, go ahead and make that KPI change or make that technical change. But if the technical change is, if we look at your KPIs and your biggest room for improvement is just, making more putts from 8 to 12 feet, you probably don't necessarily need to spend a whole bunch of time doing a swing change. If you're normally landing at 8 to 12 feet proximity, but you just stink at putting, you should probably spend more time putting and practicing that. So, especially in the winter, you're not going to have as much daylight. So you want to make sure you're very focused on what you're working on. In the gym, this is where we're building up your volume, and we're really focused on building a good base of strength. This is kind of like your foundational element time here. As we get towards the end of the winter, obviously golf's going to start increasing in how much you're playing. You got days get longer. In gym, we're starting to take our volume down, and we're taking our intensity up. So that's, we're kind of shifting away from a strength focus and more taking that strength and transferring it into the power element of it, keeping everything extremely fast, extremely powerful. And then as we get into the summer, we kind of will continue with that high intensity, but the volume will be the lowest that it'll be at the entire year from a performance standpoint, because you're using so much energy on the golf side of things. So you're playing a lot, it's hot, you're walking multiple day events in a row, travel time, that takes a lot out of your nervous system. So what we want in the gym is to, we still want to keep your power outputs high, keep you healthy, keep you mobile, but the actual intensity or the volume that we're going to be doing in the gym will be low. But we can maintain outputs if we keep our intensity high. If you go low volume and low intensity, you're screwed. Don't do that. You lose a lot of percentages. So just think if your volume is high, intensity is going to be low. If your intensity is high, volume should be low from a golf perspective. Generally speaking, there's always exceptions to some rules, but for most people watching this, that'll hold true. And then And then as you get into the fall, we start to kind of return back to that off season. You're going to finishing up golf season. I always call the fall duct tape time. We're trying to kind of keep golfers together for their, whether it's qualifying tournaments as professionals, your members, your member guests in the fall, as your body's kind of just getting tired from a long season, your golf trips, all that stuff. In the gym in the fall, I think it's just a good time to kind of let the nervous system recover. A lot of your workouts will focus more on circuit-based, mobility-based, stability-based, kind of giving you a little bit of a break just to get prepared to start taking on more volume and building the strength again with that next season or the next off season. All right, let me see if these will work, these videos here for you. So I've put together some, examples of power moves. I may need to share a different screen. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to share a different one so you guys can see these. Get a different screen on here for you. All right, that should work. Let me know if this works for you guys. Give me a little bit of trouble here. All right, so let's see if this works. So we got the plan. All right, so we're going to go back to the other one. Sorry about that. The videos worked when I tested it. All right, so if you guys can see here, all right, there you go. So if you see here, so on the left, we have basically he's doing a hop back Ironman throw, so medicine ball throws. Those are going to be basically, on that speed strength side of the spectrum. So if you're thinking about, basically moving really, really fast, that's what that one will be. And then if we have on the right, you see there I'm sitting on a box, that you're looking at from there, kind of going from zero speed, zero motion to exploding up onto the box. So that would be a power move as well. And then we have the bottom one. That's the K pulley. So that's the eccentric flywheel. So that's working on the basically the rotary power element of it. So if you guys remember the study that we did on the eccentric flywheel training, that had 150% better club head speed improvements than just strength and conditioning or like rotary work with bands and with bands and with cables. Let me see. I think I might have got this working here while it's going. So you guys watch this. So here he is. So this would be an example of a speed strength video. Of course, it's going to take a little while to load. All right, we're going to bail on that technology. Not working. um, all right. So then our next one is for strength, some examples of strength exercises here. And if you guys were kind of coming to the end here, if you have questions about specific things for you to be thinking about or be working on, by all means, go ahead and put them in the chat box. So strength exercises. So here, so we have kind of a barbell squat on the left there. On the right, that would be a flywheel squat on the K box. And then on the top right, you got Bobby up there set up to do kind of a split single leg split squat. So with your strength stuff, you want to make sure you're obviously doing your double leg complex movements like squatting, deadlifting, bench pressing. That's how you're going to get your biggest strength gains. But then you also want to be looking at single leg work so that you're balancing out, right and left individually. One doesn't take over for the other. And then obviously also it gives you an opportunity to work on some balance as well. Dynamic functional balance that you can take to the golf course. A lot of research doing like balance training on unstable surfaces in the strength and conditioning world or in that setting actually is going to decrease your power outputs because you're having to divert so much more energy to not falling over that you can't use it to actually move the load. And then you have obviously the eccentric flywheel squatting, which is another way to work on that eccentric overload, which from particularly from an adult golfer standpoint, the eccentric focused training as part of the triphasic approach has a huge benefit to you in terms of club speed gains relative to traditional training, about 60% better, so quite large. You have mobility, so you see Alex on the left here doing a T-spine opener, so that's working if in that mobility assessment, so you don't rotate well. Obviously we do this a lot in the beginning of our workouts, focusing on the different rotary centers. And then you have your shoulder external rotation. That's me on the left there. That would be the assessment that you're doing. And then obviously there's strategies to help improve that too. So with speed training, definitely some things to discuss here. Everybody always asks about overspeed training. There's some other kind of systems that are coming out there from different companies, different approaches. I think Mach 3, Super Speed Golf, there's a number of different ones out there. Basically, I think the big thing to think about here is it needs to fit into the broader picture of your training program. And like we always talk about, if your club head speed percentage is below your power percentages and you have good mobility, speed training is probably going to be awesome for you. And it should be incorporated into your system. If, however, you have your club head speed percentage higher than your power numbers, or you have, whatever, let's say they're equal, your club speed and your power percentiles are equal, but you have poor mobility, so you don't have good mobility in the rotary centers. Speed training of any kind is probably going to be dangerous to you. We'd want to address those mobility limitations first, and then we can look at getting into speed training. So if you have a mobility limitation rotary, it is a definite no-no. Let's fix that so you're not going as fast as you can into restrictions. That's how we get hurt through compensations. And then I think the other thing then is, though, if those are good, knowing if your club head speed percentile is above your power numbers, it's not going to be something that's for you. If it's the reverse of that, though, it potentially could be huge. Obviously, there's the research we did with the lower volume protocols definitely showed the same results as if you did the hundreds of swings. If you look at, we did it compared to the super speed studies, super speed protocols. And they're, if we look at their current protocols, it's almost 12,000 swings in a year on top of your normal swinging. If you did the reduced volume, it'd be about 3,000 total, 2 times a week for the whole year. So that's a significant, it's about 75% less volume that you'd put on your body. So definitely we'd recommend that, particularly since there was no benefit difference. Both help the same. And the overspeed training definitely has value in your program. It definitely increases how much speed you'll gain long term than just strength and conditioning and not doing any of it. The key is that we use it intelligently when it needs to be used. It definitely does not need to be done all year long. There are times to use it, there are times not to use it. And as you saw kind of with the ups and downs of when golf goes up, gym goes down, when golf is really, really high, not really going to be a great time for a lot of overspeed-based training. So that's kind of the nitty-gritty of kind of off-season, hopefully just kind of high level to give you guys an understanding of what you should be thinking about. And kind of, as you're doing the programs, understanding why you're seeing different volumes and weights and reps and those sorts of things. If you're now is the time of year where you wanted to do some more cardio, you wanted to do more volume, more sets and reps, this is kind of the time to start to think about that as you're kind of starting your off season. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you're starting your season. You should be decreasing your reps, increasing the intensity because your golf is increasing more. So hopefully that helps, guys. I said if you have any other questions, always you have my email, Chris@powersuccess.com. Y'all know where to find me. You can know our number here, and just shoot us over questions. I think the key with doing these webinars is that you guys understand why you're doing everything you're doing in your programs. And so hopefully this kind of gave you some insight in terms of why you're seeing the things that you are seeing in your off-season protocols or off-season programs, and then also in your in-season programs and everything in between. So sorry for the technical difficulties. Would have been cooler if those videos worked, but we'll make sure they're working next time. So hopefully you guys have a good weekend coming up, and look forward to seeing you around here soon.